If you have chronic pain or there's something that's not quite working in your life, you might need to consider to align your mind, body, and soul so you can heal holistically. And that's why we have Charlotte Phelps, and she's going to tell us all about that. So Charlotte, please tell us, how can entrepreneurs align their mind, body, and soul so they can heal holistically? Heal Podcast with Lily Patrascu shares longevity and anti-aging techniques to stay young forever, increase energy, overcome addiction, and live your longest, best life ever. Shared by world's most innovative, alternative, and traditional health thought leaders, healers, and doctors. Discover quantum healing strategies to heal your mind, body, and soul.
Oh, hi, Lily. No, it's lovely to be here with you. I think the key thing for entrepreneurs is to really understand that their business is them. And therefore, their health and their alignment of soul, mind, and body reflects on what they are doing in their business. So for them, the soul, mind, and body alignment comes down to the fact that we are energetic beings, and therefore the energy that we give off is the energy we get back. So my own personal journey to learn this was through a chronic illness. And even now today, I am managing chronic illness, if you like, whilst being able to live a full physical, mental and spiritual life. So maybe if I tell my story a little bit, it'll help explain that. So I started out in life, I suppose. That's a really bad way of phrasing it, but not really having any illness or issues growing up at all. I was very, very healthy and enjoyed a pretty normal childhood and education. And then after I left university, I started working as a graduate for Barclays Bank on their sort of fast stream to management. And it was quite soon after I started that I started getting these really odd symptoms that made living really quite challenging on a day-to-day basis. And it started off with like really sore feet, not like from wearing heels, not like on the ball of your feet, but around the edge of your feet. And it was really, really sore. So wearing shoes was very difficult. And then I started bloating a lot, which other than being unpleasant for me, made wearing suits and things in the office quite painful, to the fact that I used to take a change of clothes with me to change into at lunchtime that were of the same clothes, larger size, because I was very embarrassed by this effect that I was having. Over time, my bowel started shutting down, and for 4 years, I was basically only able to manage my bowel and my pain by doing daily enemas. I was doing 2 or 3 enemas a day. So to fit that in around my career, I'd be getting up at like 5 a.m. to do an enema before going to the gym and still be at my desk by 8 o'clock in the morning, doing a full day, and then coming home and having to do an enema again before I went to bed in order to relieve the bloating of the day. Then I started getting these awful rashes, a bit like hives, but all over my body. And I remember going for a job interview. It was for a really big job. It was chief of staff to a member of the board in Barclays Wealth. And I had so many hives on my face, I had to wear like what felt like an inch of makeup to try and cover them all up, because I didn't think it would, look very good if you turned up covered in blotches and rashes. And for all of these, I was going to the doctor, and the doctor kept saying, "There's nothing wrong with you. The tests are normal," and almost sort of suggesting it was in my head. But I knew that other people weren't having to do what I had to do just to get through the day. And even when I managed to persuade them to refer me to a dermatologist for the rashes, they took biopsies, and 6 weeks later they said, "Yes, you've got hives." And I said, "From what?" And they said, "We don't know. That's not what we do. We don't, we just tell you what you've got. We don't tell you why." And I just felt I was never getting any answers. And it was an incredibly frustrating journey. And it made living my day-to-day life incredibly hard. But I was still pushing through. And at one point, I got some test results back that said that my adrenals were operating at about 4%. And the practitioner who gave me the results said, "You shouldn't be able to get out of bed, let alone do a full day's work." But I was. Long days every day, in quite a high pressurized job. And so my body was essentially shutting down around me. And in June 2011, I finally managed to get a diagnosis, which was that my bowel was perforating due to a parasite that I'd picked up probably a decade before. And they gave me 6 weeks to live, which when you're 31 is not very much. And at that point, I had to make a decision. And I think this is one of the really key things in any facet of life that becomes really important, is I made a choice that I wanted to live. And now I understand the neuroscience of choice is incredibly powerful, because when you make a choice rather than doing something that you think you should do or you ought to do, it releases a whole different set of neurotransmitters. It releases dopamine, which obviously is the pleasure hormone. It releases glutamate, which is around motivation and reinforcement. And that change in brain chemistry then starts changing the physical manifestation of how your body is dealing with. And so having made a choice that I was going to live, no matter what, 6 weeks was not going to be the end of my story, I decided that Western medicine clearly wasn't doing anything. They said there was nothing they could do. So I opened my mind and I embraced the alternative. And I was very lucky to be introduced to a healer who's a clairsentient healer, which is a very obscure field. There aren't many of them around. And they essentially manifest your physical symptoms. They heal themselves, and in doing so, they heal you. And what was fascinating about this experience is I met her, and she went from the top of my head to the tips of my toes and told me everything that ever had or was wrong with me, including operations I'd had, scars I got. And she said, what's actually good about this is it's actually only one issue. And the issue is that you have a limiting belief that you are not enough. And so no matter how hard you push yourself, no matter what you do, no matter how successful you are, you will never, ever think you're enough. And you'll always self-sabotage yourself, because actually achieving something would demonstrate that you were enough. And that's not the belief. So you will self-sabotage yourself. And illness is a really good way of doing that, because it basically cuts you off at the knees of being able to give your energy and your soul to things. But she said, if we heal this one limiting belief, you'll heal. And sure enough, in 5 weeks, we healed with meditation, which again was a little bit of a mind skewy to think you could heal in meditation what doctors said wasn't healable. But I did. And after that, I was a bit of an unstoppable machine, because I needed to understand what on earth had happened and why I'd survived, and what that really meant for people who perhaps were stuck in an identity of, there is only one way of doing things. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that we can all learn from people like me who've had transformative health experiences, is you are capable of anything. You just have to line things up. So being able to have a healthy body comes a lot from the chemistry that's released by your brain, which is set by your mindset and your belief patterns. And managing those is key to a physical body health. But understanding your soul in terms of what gets you ticking, what you want to leave as your legacy when you leave this life, that is going to help you set your mindset. And so there's sort of this alignment that goes through. If you are clear on what you're here to do and why, and what makes you happy, what brings you joy, then you can sort out your subconscious patterns and your mindset and your habits in your mind in order to make that clear. And then your body will have all the resources that it needs in terms of energy, amino acids, nutrition, whatever it might be, in order to deliver that, because the body is like the vehicle of delivery, if you like. And so that's what I mean by alignment. Many people live out of alignment because they're living someone else's dream for them, or they're living sort of cut off at the knees through their mindset, or with a physicalization of that challenge.
Thank you. Tell us about how can someone relieve their pain? Let's say if they have chronic pain, what would be some of the first 5 steps, or however many steps, to the path to recovery or reducing pain, so that they can start to become more in alignment with what they came to do in the world?
Sure. So just so everyone is aware, my chronic pain comes from the fact that I have Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, which is a genetic mutation whereby your body produces too much collagen. So great for the skin, not so good for joints and things. It makes you very hypermobile, and therefore you really get a lot of aches and pains. So you live in sort of this low level chronic pain. And if you try to do too much exercise or overdo it, then you sort of get acute chronic pain. So the first things to understand is that that comes from a deficiency of various things within the chemistry that the body is creating. So the first thing I would highly recommend to anyone in pain is you give yourself as much as a chance as possible of processing that by really maxing out on supplements like magnesium. And I do that by having an Epsom salt bath. So I literally absorb it transdermally through the skin. It's our biggest organ, and it's a fantastic way to do it. If you don't have a bath, there's magnesium sprays. I also take magnesium orally, just to try and help get the inflammation out of the digestive system as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing is acupressure or acupuncture, depending on whether you're keen on needles or not. So I have essentially an acupressure mat, which is like a bed of nails, but nicer. And I lie on that morning and night. And that really helps to take the stress and strain out of the key systems that interact in the body through the spine, in terms of being able to relieve a lot of that pain. So those are the two things I do on a physical level. On a mental level, I do a daily gratitude practice, and it sounds slightly odd to say that gratitude can help with chronic pain, but it's all about the chemistry that's being produced. And there is lots of evidence that showing being in a state of gratitude switches off all of the stress and pain receptors in the brain and switches on the positive sort of endorphins and parasympathetic nerve kind of areas. So I do a daily practice. I do it morning and night to be grateful of the day that's about to come and the day that has been. I've been doing that every day for almost 11 years now, and it feels weird if I don't do it. The second thing I would say from a mental perspective is meditation. I was very lucky back in 2020 to be part of Dr. Joe Dispenza's coherence healing experiment around pain, where I meditated here in the UK for an hour each week, and he had 8 participants in a room in the US meditating. And we both meditated on the same intention, which is that I have less pain. And I would say the physical things I have to do now to manage my pain have reduced by at least 80% as a result of that. And I still do that meditation weekly in addition to my daily meditation exercise, just one specifically focused on pain management. And then from a soul perspective, I'm really honest with myself about what brings me joy, about what really makes me happy. And I make sure that I do something of that every day. So I know that laughter is the best medicine in the world. And I make sure, whether it be in my lunch break or before I go to bed at night, that I watch something that makes me proper belly laugh. And I can just feel the stress and the inflammation leaving my body. So whatever it might be, if it's cooking or gardening or being out in nature, just find whatever it is and work it into your daily routine, and your whole system will thank you for it.
Thank you. In my case, I self-sabotage a lot, and how I do it is specifically through illness. So, for example, I organize large events of, let's say, 250 people. And what I've discovered is that maybe a few days before the event, I get awful migraines and my voice, starts to hurt. I get sore throat and cough, and then I feel really tired, and then I end up not sleeping. So it's like there's this massive self-sabotage that happens. And even so, I still manage to deliver the event, but I just feel like I am a car that's trying to drive uphill without petrol. So I wonder for people who self-sabotage, perhaps because of a negative limiting belief, like I'm not good enough, what would you have them do so that they can start healing that? And through healing that negative belief of I'm not good enough, to kind of start to reduce the symptoms that would make them self-sabotage their actions?
Oh, it's a great question. So yeah, a self-sabotage, I think, is a really common trait that many people probably aren't even aware that they're doing. But the example you gave is perfect. You've been building up to something, you really want it to go well, and then something always seems to get in the way. And health is a really easy way for us to do that to ourselves. So there's been lots and lots of research into limiting beliefs, and they've sort of said there are 5 main ones that we tend to use against ourselves. So I am not enough being the one that I experienced. I think the one you said you resonate with there as well. There's also I don't belong. Like, this isn't something I should be doing. I'm not allowed to do this, almost, that sense of it. The I am powerless. So that sort of victim mentality can often be a driving one. The world is unsafe. Is another key one that can quite often, sort of like this, I'm putting myself in a situation that I just don't feel safe in. And the last one, my brain's gone completely blank. Hang on. Belong. Damn it. I hate it when your mind does this. I'm so sorry. But let's come back to that 5th one. But in general, almost all of our negative thoughts, it has been shown, can be tracked back to one of the 5 core negative beliefs. And there are ways we have to understand that neuroplasticity and studies of the subconscious brain have told us that we can change these beliefs, which is great, but it's not necessarily that easy to do because they have been ingrained in us for a very long time, often from very young. So our brain, until the age of 7, essentially is in a state of hypnosis. And anything that happens is taken as fact and written down. So we don't understand sarcasm, we don't get irony, logic is king. And so something that happens is a fact. So if you as a child were teased, that perhaps, you're a girl and you can't really do certain things, then that will be a belief that is written in your subconscious neural pathways. And then as you live your life after the age of 7, it'll extract things and add evidence to it. So these are deeply ingrained, very strong pathways. So we have to accept that changing them is not impossible, but it's not necessarily easy. Although the modern neuroscience-based modalities have shown that actually it's a lot easier than it used to be. So when I was changing my beliefs, I used to use self-hypnosis. And this was advocated by Dr. Bruce Lipton, so I learnt it from him. And essentially, I would just do a voice recording on my phone of the beliefs I wanted to have. And then I would play them as I went to sleep, as your brain goes through that hypnosis state. And therefore, essentially, over time, by doing that repetitively, I think I did it for about 6 weeks. And I'd write affirmations, I'd stick them all over the house. And as I walked through a door, I'd say it, because repetition is the other way that the subconscious brain learns, hypnosis and repetition. So I was trying to basically use all of those standard neuroplasticity and aspects to rewrite it. Nowadays, it's actually a lot easier. There are many belief change modalities where they've worked out how to get your brain essentially into that subconscious state and literally rewrite them. The one I love is called Psych K, and it's the one that Bruce Lipton does as well. And literally you force your brain into a whole brain state. So the left and right hemispheres are talking to each other. And then you just, almost like you're an editor, and you just delete a belief statement out and you put a new one in, and then you do another whole brain state in order to lock it in. And having experienced that, it is crazy how you don't feel any different, but then a situation arises and you find yourself, I'm not reacting like I would normally, or I don't have the same emotion about that. I did it around my family. I used to get very triggered by my brothers. And the next time I saw them, there was just nothing, So if you don't even have to know what the belief is that's wrong or that's holding you back. You just have to know what you want. What do you want to know instead? And then just either write that down and listen it back. I personally would do both, because with these sorts of things, it's never like, you can do too much. So I would write them down, stick them all over the house, record them, play it to myself, and perhaps find a Psych K practitioner. But there are many others, Brainworks, EM Detox, all these different kind of modalities that you can do that essentially trap the old belief and change it within the subconscious mind. It's life-changing, honestly.
Thank you. Let's say if someone had chronic pain of, let's say, migraines or back pain or pain somewhere else, how would they go about first knowing what causes it so they can address it?
I mean, again, that's an interesting one, because there are two kind of schools of thought here. There are people who want to understand why something's happened and understand the cause of it, and then there are people who just want it to stop. And I would argue there's a path and a course for both. For the people that really need to understand, it's a harder path, because quite often the information you get isn't all that helpful in changing the situation. Knowledge doesn't necessarily give you a solution. So for a lot of people today, particularly if they have a chronic pain issue, that perhaps their traditional route into medicine hasn't helped them find a solution for, I would say perhaps try and challenge yourself on why you need to understand it, and instead move to thinking about how you can remove it or address it. So I've certainly found that a lot of my physical pain is down to a trapped emotion. And there's some wonderful research called The Chemistry of Emotion by Candice Pert that shows that when we have an emotion, particularly a very large emotion, like we suffer some trauma or some grief, or we get very angry or very frustrated, and we aren't capable of processing it all at the time it happens, we translate that emotion into a cellular structure and we store it in our body. And if on the premise that we'll come back at some later date and process it. But because we don't know we're doing that, we don't know to go back and process it. So it just sits there. And eventually it sort of, if you like, festers and causes the cellular structures around which it's structured to be changed. And work by the likes of, say, like Louise Hay would say, well, actually, we can match diseases of certain parts of the body with certain emotions. And what Candice Pert proved is there's an actual chemical relationship between those two. But there are some wonderful new neuroscience-based modalities using the energetic structure of the body that can release those. There's also some fabulous breath work techniques where you can actually focus on that emotion and breathe it out of your body. And I've seen some people have some amazing releases, either sort of crying, shouting, or even orgasming, in terms of how they're releasing that emotion. A fabulous technique that I've been using a lot myself of late, because I've been having some respiratory challenges, is the emotion code or the body code. Which is a fabulous modality created by Bradley Nelson, who was a chiropractor, actually. It's amazing how many of these neuroscience modalities come from chiropractors. And he basically enables us to understand what has happened, and then just remove it, almost literally using the same kind of principle as the subconscious, but releasing it from the emotion by resetting our energy pathways that are holding it. And some breath work, as I said, is also another fantastic route. So I would highly recommend that they either find someone who can just help them release it without understanding it, or they do some work within themselves, something like a stream of consciousness writing or inner child writing or journaling of some description, whilst focusing on that pain and see what comes out. Because usually it is just a trapped challenge, unless, of course, it's physical, like a trapped nerve or something, but a doctor would find that. So, yeah, those are the things I would strongly recommend, Lily.
Thank you. What are some good health habits that will enable someone to align their mind, body, and soul over the long term so that they stop manifesting new illnesses?
Yeah, do you know, I think the challenge is that in lots of cases in life, we kind of want to get to the point where we're done. And health and well-being, of course, isn't like that, because we're constantly having experiences and new emotions, and new challenges come into our lives, or new people come into our lives, and new desires form. So I think, yeah, habits are a really good way to get around that, because we need something that we're capable of doing lifelong, as long as we don't get too strict, because sometimes we have to change our habits. So I always talk about curating a tool belt for life. So you put the habits that are useful and working for you now in the different pouches, the soul, mind, and body pockets of your tool belt. And then over time, you need to assess whether or not they're still working for you. So, for example, I used to manage my pain with a far infrared sauna bag that I'd sort of zip myself into a couple of times a week and sweat it out. But after a while, that actually wasn't doing it for me. And so I moved on to these really, really hot Epsom salt baths. And I'm sure at some point that might not work and I may move back to something else. So it's about curating that tool belt. But now, daily habits to help not manifest illness. So again, the gratitude practice, I think, is essential. And honestly, I think anyone who doesn't kind of get how writing down what you're grateful for could do it should really go and read some of the research exactly on what gratitude can do. I've written a blog about that on my website. I'm sure we can share that, Lily. But gratitude it truly is a life-shifting aspect. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say would be building yourself a daily routine that sets you up for success every day, that sort of gets you into the mindset. So there are various things I do that are pain management related, but there are various things I do that are about getting myself in the right mindset. So, and it's going to sound really odd, but I play games on my phone every morning, but they're like mind focus, memory games, and the things that really make you think about and focus. I also have various sound frequencies that have been proven to trigger certain parts of the brain. So if I've got a really difficult day ahead, whilst I'm meditating, I will play that frequency so that I know that my brain is primed. It triggers the pineal gland and gets the real connections and everything going. And then after that, I would say, what you have for breakfast is probably a really key part of your daily habit in setting you up for success. Now, the challenge here, of course, is what I have for breakfast won't be what works for other people because our bodies are different. Structurally, our microbiomes are different in our gut. So I know that I need a certain type of breakfast, a high fiber breakfast. Other people will need a high protein breakfast. Other people will, but it's just about working out and understanding your gut is really important in that. What your body is searching for from a nutritional perspective to give you the energy for the day. So yes, gratitude, getting your headspace in the right way, using either a meditation or a frequency, and then making sure your gut is in good order to help you. I would say a good daily routines to start with.
Thank you. Is there anything that can provide instant chronic pain relief aside from everything we talked about?
Instant chronic pain relief.
Yes, like anything like magical that
if I had the magic elixir. It's going to sound really odd, but there are various acupressure points and tapping points. So again, we're tapping into the electrical frequency. The key one for pain is actually right here between your between your thumb and your thing there. So if I suddenly have a really bad pain, so for example, I quite often when I'm walking my dogs in muddy areas, I'll kind of slip and then my leg will lock out and my hip becomes incredibly painful. So I will then stand there for a minute or two and pinch this area, and I can literally feel the pain disappearing out of that area. So I'd probably say that. There are a few other ones. There's one on the top of the foot, one on the back of the neck, or tapping your clavicle points just here from an EFT perspective. If I go up a little bit, which is called K9. K7 is a really, really good point in terms of getting the body to release stress hormones. So chronic pain quite often is exacerbated by the fact that our stress system is highly activated. So being able to remove the cortisol from the system takes the inflammation out of the pain equation. And that usually makes pain much more easily to deal with. The one other thing I would say is magnesium. There are some companies now, I won't name any names unless Lily tells me I can, that produce this sort of magnesium glycinate liquid. I always have a couple in my handbag. High sports people use them after exercise to help process things. But if you do have a chronic flare-up, sort of sucking down one of those is a fabulous way to just give the body what it needs to process it away.
Thank you. Tell us about the Alchemy of Being and where entrepreneurs can find you to discover more about how they can work with you to align their mind, body, and soul to heal holistically.
Yeah, so the Alchemy of Being really is my passion project. So as I said, after I didn't die, I became slightly obsessed. I have a very analytical mind. I became slightly obsessed with understanding what had happened and disappeared down many, many rabbit holes. Ended up taking lots of qualifications and degrees and all sorts of things over the last sort of 12 years. And the Alchemy of Being essentially is the summation of all of that knowledge and experience. So it's a website, thealchemyofbeing.me. And it's got a Wikipedia on there of more than 220 modalities, and explains how they work neuroscientifically, physiologically, what it should feel like, and where you can find a good practitioner. It's got lots of resources in terms of hundreds of books that dig down into the minutiae of different aspects, as well as those ones that kind of challenge us to awaken to our true purpose. It's got products on there, the ones I use for pain, the ones I use for sleep, supplements, the whole sort of shebang. It's got 5 amazing practitioners that have become a kind of staple to me, that operate across a wide spectrum of modalities. So you can find us there. You subscribe, we do a weekly and monthly newsletter. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and on Instagram as well. So we're pretty easy to find. We are still relatively new, and so don't be scared. Come join us. Yes, it's all about just information sharing. There is nothing for me to gain out of it, if you know what I mean. So it's a very safe place. We've tried to write everything from a very accessible point of view, and to help people take those first steps, because quite often the first step's the scariest step into being willing to try something a little bit out there, based on where you're starting from. Or if you're already on that journey and there's something in your tool belt that isn't quite doing it for you anymore, then hopefully we've got some ideas that can help you replace that with something that's got a greater level of efficacy for you.
Thank you. Follow me for more interviews with world's most innovative health change makers to live your healthiest life ever.